It came without warning, without a courtroom, without even a single word spoken aloud. On a summer morning in London, a judgment was quietly released, and in the space of a few short sentences, 7 years of a man's life, and everything he had sacrificed for it, came crashing down. Prince Harry was in Britain that very day. He was smiling for cameras, doing good work, talking about wounded soldiers. And somewhere in the background, on screens across the country, the news was breaking that he had lost. Not just a court case, something far, far bigger than that. Because to understand what truly fell apart for Harry on that day, you have to understand what this battle had already cost him. It had cost him his father. It had cost him his brother. It had cost him, by his own admission, almost everything he once held dear. And now, in a single, silent judgment, it was all for nothing. This is the story of the verdict that changed everything. And I promise you, by the end, you may find yourself feeling something you did not expect. Sympathy. Let me take you back to where this all began, because Harry's war with the British press was never really about money. To understand him, you have to remember the boy. Harry was 12 years old when his mother, Princess Diana, died in a car crash while being pursued through the streets of Paris. 12. He has spoken over the years with raw and painful honesty about how that night shaped every single day that followed. He grew up believing deep in his bones that the press had hunted his mother and that they had helped to kill her. And he grew up making a private vow that it would never ever happen again. Not to him, not to the woman he loved, not to his children. And so when he came of age, Harry did something no member of the royal family had done before. He took the press to court, again and again and again. It was a crusade. It was, in his own words, a mission to slay dragons, and it consumed him. Now, this particular case, the one that came to its shattering conclusion this week, was perhaps the biggest of them all. Harry, together with a group of other well-known claimants including the singer Elton John, the actress Liz Hurley, and Baroness Doreen Lawrence, brought a sweeping claim against Associated Newspapers, the publishers of the Daily Mail. The allegations they made were extraordinarily serious. They accused the newspaper group of unlawful information gathering on a vast scale, of hearing private investigators, of tapping phones, of listening to voicemails, of obtaining private records through deception. In total, the group brought 97 separate allegations before the High Court. Harry himself gave evidence in person, sitting in the witness box for around 2 hours in January of this year, describing how the coverage had, in his view, made his wife Meghan's life a misery. He believed with all his heart that this was his moment, that after everything, after years of legal battles, he would finally prove what he had always believed about the newspapers that shaped his life. He thought, at last, he was going to win. And then on Tuesday morning, the judgment landed, and it was total. There was something almost eerie about the way it arrived. There was no dramatic courtroom scene, no judge in robes reading out the verdict while the world held its breath, no opportunity for Harry to stand and hear his fate delivered face to face. Instead, the judgment was simply released remotely, quietly, electronically, a document appearing on screens, and it was done. 7 years of a bitter, all-consuming battle ended not with a bang, but with the soft click of a file being published. And Harry was not sitting in a courtroom to receive it. He was out in London at an event for the Invictus Games, doing the work he loves, surrounded by veterans and photographers. He was smiling, and at some point that morning, in some quiet corner between engagements, someone must have had to walk up to him and tell him. Imagine that moment. Imagine having to keep your composure, to keep smiling for the cameras, to keep shaking hands and speaking about the courage of wounded soldiers, while your whole world is quietly collapsing around you. There is a particular kind of loneliness in that, and whatever you think of Harry, one has to feel for the man in that moment. Mr. Justice Nicklin, the High Court judge, dismissed every single one of the 97 allegations, every one. And here I want to be very careful and very precise because this matters enormously and it has been badly misreported by some. The judge did not rule that Harry had lied. He did not brand him dishonest. What the judge found was something different and in a way more devastating. He found that the claimants had simply failed to prove their case. The evidence, he said, was not there. Harry's lawyers had argued, in effect, that because the information published was private, and because the newspaper could not fully explain how it had obtained it, the court should therefore infer that it must have been gathered unlawfully. And Justice Nicklin firmly rejected that logic. He wrote that this was not a permissible approach. In simple terms, the judge said you cannot prove wrongdoing merely by pointing at a gap in the explanation. The burden of proof lay with Harry, and he had not met it. The judge found that there remained a realistic possibility that the stories had come from perfectly lawful sources: legitimate journalism, friends who talked, leaky social circles, press officers, other newspapers. It was not that Harry was called a liar. It was that he could not prove what he so passionately believed to be true. And for a man who had staked everything on this fight, that distinction may have offered very little comfort. The reaction was immediate and brutal. Associated newspapers declared it an overwhelming victory, a magnificent vindication of the Daily Mail's journalism, and said their reporters, whose reputations had been so publicly questioned, were now completely exonerated. It was, in their words, a victory for a free press. And here, in fairness, we must acknowledge their side of it. A free press that can hold the powerful to account is one of the pillars of any democracy. These journalists had faced years of allegations of criminality, and a judge had now examined the evidence in detail and cleared them entirely. From their point of view, they had been wrongly accused, and they had waited 7 long years to be believed. Harry, for his part, was devastated, and he did not hide it. Together with Baroness Lawrence, he issued a statement calling the verdict a complete whitewash. He said they had come to court seeking justice and accountability, and had received neither. He pointed out with some anguish that other newspaper groups had previously admitted to and settled similar claims, and he could not understand why this case had gone so differently. You can hear the disbelief in those words, the bewilderment of a man who feels that a truth he has lived with his entire life has just been denied by the law itself. Whether you agree with him or not, that anguish is real. But the ruling brought something else with it too, something colder and more practical. Because when you lose a case of this magnitude, you very often have to pay the other side's legal costs. And the newspaper group has stated that the litigation ran up more than £50 million in legal costs, and that they intend to seek recovery of what they spent defending themselves. £50 million. Even for a man of Harry's means, that is a figure to make the blood run cold. The financial consequences of this defeat could be enormous, and they will now hang over him for a long time to come. And yet, and here is where this story turns from a legal drama into something genuinely tragic, the money is not the worst of it, not even close. Because the real price Harry paid for this crusade was paid long ago, and it was paid in the only currency that ever truly mattered: family. Harry himself has said, openly and painfully, that his litigation against the British press was a primary source of his falling out with his father and with his brother. Think about that for a moment. The royal family for generations has followed one iron rule: never complain, never explain, never take your grievances into a courtroom. It simply is not done. But Harry broke that rule. He defied his family, defied centuries of tradition, and dragged the House of Windsor's name through the High Court because he believed he was fighting a righteous war. And it cost him dearly. It drove a wedge between him and King Charles. It helped shatter his bond with William, the brother who had once been his closest companion in the world. He walked away from the family, from the country, from everything he had known, and he did it in large part in the name of this fight. And of all those losses, it is the loss of his brother that feels the most desperately sad, because William and Harry were once inseparable. They were the 2 little boys who walked, side by side, behind their mother's coffin, while the whole world watched in silence. 2 children, bound together by a grief so enormous that no one else on earth could ever fully understand it. They only had each other. For years, in every photograph, they stood shoulder to shoulder, the heir and the spare, facing the strange, gilded, impossible life they had been born into. And now they barely speak. The brother who understood his pain better than anyone, who shared the very same loss, who walked that same terrible road behind that same coffin, is now, effectively, a stranger. And part of what drove them apart was this crusade, this fight against the press, which Harry pursued in his mother's name. That is the bitterest irony of all. In trying to avenge Diana, Harry lost the one person left in the world who had loved her exactly as he did. Whatever else you may think about any of them, that is a tragedy in the truest sense of the word. So picture the whole terrible shape of it. Harry gave up his family, his home, his brother, and his relationship with his father in service of a war against the press that he believed he could win. He risked everything on it. And this week, the court told him he had not proved a single one of his 97 claims. He lost. Everything he sacrificed, and the war was still lost. Sit with that for a moment, because it is genuinely one of the saddest turns in this family's whole modern story. There is a particular kind of anguish that comes not from losing, but from losing after you have already paid the price of victory. Harry had already given up everything. The family had already fractured. The bridges were already burned. The relationships were already broken beyond easy repair. And all of it had been endured in the belief that the fight was worth it, that at the end of the long road there would be vindication, truth, and some measure of justice for his mother. That belief was the thing that made all the sacrifice bearable. And this week, quietly, a high court judge took that belief away. What do you do when you have burned your whole life down for a cause, and then the cause itself collapses beneath you? Where do you put all that pain? How do you look back at everything you gave up and make any sense of it at all? These are not questions with easy answers, and they are the questions Harry now faces, alone, an ocean away from the very people who might once have helped him bear them. This verdict landed in the very same week that Harry was back in Britain, the very same week that his father's offer of a place to stay at Buckingham Palace had been withdrawn amid confusion and hurt. The very same week that his hopes of bringing his children to meet their grandfather, who has not seen them in 4 years, collapsed over security fears. The very same week he was here on British soil, doing good work for wounded veterans. Every single one of his hopes for that homecoming crumbled, one after another, within days. The reunion did not happen. The palace door closed, and then the judgment came. A man who came home hopping to rebuild, and who instead watched everything fall apart in public in the space of a few short days. In photographs from that day, he was still smiling, still shaking hands, still doing his duty. But one can only imagine what was happening behind that smile. And somewhere else in Britain that same day, an elderly king was going about his own duties, working through his own illness, and one wonders what he felt when the news reached him. Whatever has passed between them, whatever hurt has been exchanged, Charles is still a father. And no father, however wounded, however angry, watches his child suffer a public humiliation of that magnitude without feeling something. Perhaps he felt vindicated. Perhaps he felt sorrow. Perhaps, most likely of all, he felt that terrible, helpless ache of a parent watching a grown child walk a road he cannot follow them down, making choices he cannot undo, paying prices he would give anything to spare them. Two men in the same small country on the same difficult day, separated by a few miles and by a canyon of pain neither seems able to cross. That is the image that stays with me from this whole story. Not the courtroom, not the headlines. Just a father and a son, so close and so impossibly far apart, each carrying his own private grief through the same gray London afternoon. Now I want to be careful and fair here, because it would be easy, and it would be wrong, to turn this into a simple story of a man getting what he deserved. There are those who will say exactly that, and they will say it cruelly. But I don't think that is the truth, and I don't think it is worthy of us. Because when you look closely at Harry, what you actually see is a boy who lost his mother to the very machine he spent his adult life fighting. His crusade may have been misguided. His methods may have been damaging. He may well have been badly advised by lawyers with their own interests at heart. He may have hurt many people along the way, his family most of all. All of that can be true. And it can also be true that his motive at its root was love. Love for a mother he lost. love for a wife he wanted to protect, love for two small children he never wanted to see hunted the way his mother was hunted. Harry was fighting his mother's ghost, and this week, a court told him that he had lost that fight too. So here at the end is the quiet and heartbreaking truth of it all. This was never really a story about newspapers or evidence or 97 allegations or 50 million pounds. This was the story of a man who tried to slay a dragon that had already taken everything from him, and who, in the trying, lost the very things he had left. He set out to protect his family from the press, and along the way, he lost the family he was born into. He set out to win justice for his mother. And he ended up with a judgment against him, an ocean between him and his father, and a brother who no longer speaks to him. There is no triumph in any of that, not for Harry, not for the family, not in the end for anyone at all. It is simply sad. And perhaps the deepest lesson of this whole saga for all of us is a gentle and terrible one. That grief, when it hardens into a war, can consume the very life it was meant to protect. Harry chased the dragon that killed his mother for the whole of his adult life. And this week, standing in the country that raised him, in the same days that his father's door quietly closed and his children stayed an ocean away, he learned the cruelest lesson of all, that some dragons cannot be slain in a courtroom, that some wounds are not healed by winning, and that the people we push away in the fighting are, so very often, the only ones who could have helped us to heal. What happens next, nobody knows. Whether Harry appeals, whether he steps back from the courts at last, whether he ever finds his way home to the family he lost, these questions remain unanswered. But one hopes sincerely that somewhere in all this wreckage, there might yet be room for peace, for a phone call, for a reconciliation, for a grandfather to finally meet his grandchildren before the years run out. Because if this week has taught us anything, it is that no verdict, no headline, and no victory in any courtroom is worth a fraction of the family we let slip away. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please do share your thoughts in the comments and let's keep them kind. Do you think Harry will ever find peace with his family? And do you believe there is still hope for this broken royal bond? Until next time, take good care of yourselves and of the people you love.